So this episode will be perfect for first-time buyers, first-time investors looking to get into the property market, but you just don't know what to do. You don't know how much you can borrow. You don't know how much deposit you need. Well, today I'm going to give you a perfect example on what we just did for one of our first-time investor clients. Let's just call him Bob, on what we just did for him, breaking down on purchase price, borrowing power, how much deposit he needed. So I'm not saying this works perfectly for everyone. Some people out there may prefer to use a buyer's agent so they can do the negotiations themselves when they buy a property, or they don't want to go through the hassle, talking to agents, etc. You might be a first-time investor, but you're just a little bit lost on what to do. You need some guidance and you want to get started, but you don't know where to start. I got a perfect example for you on what we just did for one of our first-time investors. I'm your host, Tony Shah, and thanks for joining me on another episode of the Mortgage Chat. So this episode will be perfect for first-time buyers, first-time investors looking to get into the property market, but you just don't know what to do. You don't know how much you can borrow. You don't know how much deposit you need. Well, today I'm going to give you a perfect example on what we just did for one of our first-time investor clients. Let's just call him Bob, on what we just did for him, breaking down on purchase price, borrowing power, how much deposit he needed. So first-time buyer, first-time investor, let's just break it down what we did for this client. And the first thing we did for this first-time buyer was breaking down what was his borrowing power, because we had to understand what was his borrowing power before we can see what he can purchase. Okay, so this client is a single applicant. He's still living at home. He's paying around $200 rent a week in board. He's got $95,000 in savings. He's got a $5,000 credit card limit. He's still got HECS because he just came out of uni a few years ago. And we're going to use a proposed rental income of $500 per week for the investment he's going to buy in the future. Now, based on all this information, his borrowing power is around $615,000 as a loan. Okay, so that's actually a good spot to start. Okay, so knowing that you can borrow that much, but now we just got to work backwards again and see what he can purchase with a deposit of $95,000. In the real world, because the prices are so expensive these days, $95,000 is a lot of money, but not a lot of money in the sense that it's a big deposit for a half-decent property around Australia. And these days, to buy something that's half-decent, you need to spend around $500 to $550 to buy something that's going to grow in value and not take on that much risk in case that property or that area is a dud area. Now, because it's an investment, and depending on which state you want to buy, a lot of your savings is actually going to get eaten up from stamp duty, which is the biggest killer for first-time investors. Okay, so I'm going to break it down for you right now, what he can purchase with $95,000 and his borrowing power. After talking to a property strategist, he wanted to buy in Melbourne because he sees better value in Melbourne down the track. Now, he wanted to buy something for $650,000. Okay, and also because we like to get him the highest loan amount possible, and he can work backwards if he wants to buy something for cheaper. All right, so to buy something in Melbourne for $650,000, his stamp duty and solicitor cost is just under $38,000. So his total cost is $650,000 plus $37,800, so which is $687,800. Okay, minus his deposit of $95,000, the funds he needs for settlement is $52,800. Okay, now because he doesn't have 20% deposit plus stamp duty, and he's borrowing above 80% of the value of the property. In this case, he's borrowing around 91% as a base loan. Okay, lender's mortgage insurance is added on top of the loan. And because he's borrowing above 80%, even 90%, lender's mortgage insurance becomes very expensive. Okay, this very, very sweet spot for lender's mortgage insurance is if your base loan was 88%. Anything above that, LMI becomes more and more expensive. But sometimes it is the cost of doing business. Okay, and I'll explain a little bit later. Now, for his particular scenario, lender's mortgage insurance is actually 3.51% of the loan amount, which equates to just under $21,000. So if you add LMI onto this base loan, you're actually going to get an end loan of around $613,600. I'll round it up to the nearest 100. Okay, so based on that and his purchase price of $650,000, he's actually borrowing just under 95% of the value of the property, including lender's mortgage insurance. Now, not a lot of lenders do that, and the rate is actually going to be quite high when you're borrowing at such high LVR. So the two negatives there is, number one, the LMI cost is actually quite high, okay? And number two, the rate is going to be quite high as well because he's actually borrowing above 90%. Look, when you're borrowing above 80%, rates are a little bit higher, 0.3, 0.4, 0.6%, something like that. But when you're borrowing above 90%, your rates are going to be around 1% to 1.2% above 80% rates. Okay, look, it is what it is. It's a cost of doing business. If you don't have the deposit, then that's your only solution. Okay, so you don't really have much of a choice. It's more of a solution that you're going to get if you want to get into the property market earlier. All right, based on his borrowing power, based on his deposit, he can buy something for up to $650,000 and borrowing 95% of the total cost, including lender's mortgage insurance. So let's talk about why did he buy in Melbourne? Well, number one, Sydney. He's from Sydney. Sydney is just too expensive. He can't buy anything for $650. That's half decent unless he buys an apartment. And buying an apartment in Sydney is probably not going to do him any good in the long term because Sydney apartments just don't really grow that much, especially for your newer apartments. It's actually going back in value rather than going forward in value. Okay, so that's why Sydney was not an option for him. Brizzy, he's a bit scared because it's overpriced. It's too cooked, especially Townsville area. WA, he's a bit scared of because it's so far away and it's growing too fast, too high, too fast. South Australia had half an interest in, but Melbourne is probably what attracted him the most. Okay, but more importantly, how did he do his research, right? Because he's a first-time investor, he lives in Sydney. How the heck does he know where to research, what to do, where to look for data, where to invest, right? Especially when investing interstate is a whole new thing for him, all right? So he helped him in providing the data in Melbourne. Well, he didn't do the research himself because he's in Sydney, he's a first-time investor, he doesn't know what to do. As I just showed you, and I just told you before, investing in interstate was a brand new thing for him. He doesn't know how to even invest in Sydney, so how the heck would he know how to invest interstate? He couldn't afford to use any buyer's agents because he didn't have that $10,000, $12,000, $15,000 to pay him as a once-off fee. Well, the buyer's agent he actually tried to engage was actually charging him around $14,000. And because he's already struggling with the deposit, he can't afford to just whack $14,000 and splurge on a buyer's agent, right? Because that would have eaten up a lot of his deposit. And to be honest with you, half the buyer's agent, or even more than half the buyer's agents out there, are not worth the money they're charging, to be honest with you. Okay? I don't work with any buyer's agents, so if I'm offending any buyer's agents out there, guys, go have a cry. So what instead we did for this client was we recommended him to this research house called PropSpotter, which is someone that we work very closely with. It's a research house that do 80% of the work for you at a margin of the cost. They provide you with all the data. They drill down on the location for you based on your scope, your criteria, and what's your future plans. They provide reports for you. They send you listings on properties that can come out around those areas on a weekly basis at a fraction of the cost of a buyer's agent only. Okay, check them out. They're called PropSpotter. I believe in them. A lot of my clients have used them purely because they cannot afford to use a buyer's agent, and these guys do 80% of the work for you at a fraction of the price. Okay, so please check them out. They're a very good value for money company, research house, whatever you want to call them, to work with. Okay, so remember, they're called PropSpotter, and this is where Bob found a property down at Melbourne. Okay, guys. So after we got him the pre-approval and after he had a strategy session with PropSpotter and recommendations where he was going to look at areas like North Frankston, Craigieburn, Roxburgh Park, okay? With his pre-approval, he started doing some shopping around and he actually made an offer and purchased a property at Craigieburn for $600,000. And we actually believe he purchased his property a little bit below undervalued because he still needs to spend around $10,000, $15,000 to renovate the property a bit, just for cosmetic stuff, all right? So I believe after spending $10,000, $15,000 on it, I reckon the full valuation or the end valuation will be around $650,000. But based on the rental yield on the purchase price, the yield was around 3.5%, which is a little bit low, okay? But he can afford it because he's still living at home. He's still got the cash flow, but he's more looking for the capital growth rather than the rental yield, okay? So he was happy to, obtain a 3.5, just below 4% rental yield, all right? Because he wants that capital growth rather than the rental yield. And the reason why is so he can leverage off that property and purchase another investment property down the track. Okay, and that's why we're looking at Melbourne area because we actually see long-term growth in Melbourne area that's going to take off in the next 2, 3, 4 years. To be honest with you, it's probably taken off already. Okay, so from February 2025 to currently, which is around August 2025, you're probably going to see, or you probably have seen, a growth rate of around 6 to 7% for those 6 months period. So Bob actually done this in an 8-week period where from our initial conversation all the way to when he signed the contract to purchase, it was 8 weeks, right? And the reason why he acted so fast was because the data that PropSpotter gave him was actually quite fresh. So if he kept on delaying in the purchase, and therefore the data becomes old data, that area may start increasing in price before he purchased the property. That's why he purchased so early, because he wanted to buy in that area before the prices increase. And that actually worked perfectly for him, right? Because if you look at the growth rate in Craigieburn from February 2025 all the way to August right now, you will actually see a spike in the median house price going up. Okay, so we actually signed the contract, he actually signed the contract around March area, and we actually settled the property in around July. Okay, so he purchased just at the perfect time, just before the spike went up. Okay. So the steps Bob taken. Number one, we had a chat. We worked out his borrowing power. We worked out what he can purchase with his deposit. He set a time up to speak to PropSpotter to locate the area that best suited his needs. Then lastly, he went hunting, he went shopping, he made offers. Okay, all in the space of 8 weeks. So I'm not saying this works perfectly for everyone. Some people out there may prefer to use a buyer's agent so they can do the negotiations themselves when they buy a property, or they don't want to go through the hassle, talking to agents, etc. Okay, but like I said, not a lot of people have 10, 12, 14, 15, or even up to $20,000 to splurge out on a buyer's agent. That's why a lot of my first-time investors are happy using PropSpotter, because it's just a fraction of the price when 80% of the work is already done for them. So for everyone out there, I hope you enjoyed this video today. I hope for the first-time investors, it gave you a very good guide in what to do on your next steps in purchasing your first investment property. Also, I have plenty of videos on my YouTube channel, such as rent vesting and how equity works, right? Because you want to know how equity works, because when you buy your first investment property, you want to learn how to leverage off this investment property to buy your second, third, fourth, so on. Because both of these videos will help you tremendously in how to build a solid foundation throughout your investment journey and building a property portfolio. As always, I'm your host, Tony Shah. Thanks for joining me on another episode of The Mortgage Chat, and I'll see you next time.